India exists in a different dimension. It's not a spiritual dimension, it's a materialistic dimension. Spirituality is a foreign word which has been applied to India without understanding that there is no spirituality in that country. I have never witnessed an Indian going to a temple for a spiritual purpose.
Okay, cool. So, yeah, so thanks for watching today, guys. So I'm here with Jayant Bhandari, who is an international investment consultant. As far as I understand, that's a good way to explain it.
It is, Lawrence, and thanks very much for having me here.
Yeah, no, pleasure. Thank you. So, yeah, I've been following your work for about just over a year now. I think there was a Notice article. The Notice is like a Australian sort of independent news outlet who wrote an entire article on a lecture you gave, which I posted a couple of days ago, called Understanding India, which was an entire lecture you gave, basically picking apart the Indian mind and the chaos of Indian culture as you were born and raised in India, I believe, weren't you?
That's correct. Yeah, I grew up in India and I left the country to do my post graduation in the UK, but I grew up in India until then. And since then, I have been to India. I go to India multiple times a year.
Right, okay. So, yeah, with that said, the first question I had was what inspired you to go from an investment background into speaking up about Indian culture? Like, it's very controversial, obviously, and there's lots of Indians who probably would not like you speaking about these things.
Um, um, Lawrence, I have been doing writing for all my life actually. Since I started working, while I was working in different jobs, I continued to write for the Indian mainstream newspapers. And once I moved to Canada and the US, I started writing for the media, alternative media in North America. So I have always written, I always thought, Lawrence, as growing up, that they
I dropped out a little bit there, connection. Um, Hope it's not me. All right, sorry about that, guys. We are back. Had some technical difficulties with a power droppage. So, Jay, you were just saying earlier before we cut out that you've been writing for a long time in India before starting the work you're doing now. So, if you'd like to continue from there.
So, Lawrence, I grew up in the country and I realized that whatever was happening around me were non-stop stupidities. And I knew there was something terribly wrong about it. And I started to write about what I thought was wrong about the country, particularly after returning back from my education in the UK. I came back to India because I wanted to bring a change to that society. I wanted to participate in bringing a change to that society. And as a result, I have continued to write. I want to make Western people aware of what they are bringing in. And I want, hopefully, Indians to wake up at some point of time.
Yeah, yeah, and I really admire you for that. I think it's very courageous. Because yeah, obviously as an Australian, Indians are now the largest foreign diaspora coming in, and I think it's almost pathetic just how naive most Westerners are about not just the rest of the world in a whole, but in India as in regards to India in particular. India is obviously it's a very ancient place and it's got a lot of history or lack thereof, depending on how you look at it. But it is very chaotic, it is very crazy, and the Westerner just does not even bother to try and comprehend even the slightest parts of the Indian mind or Indian culture. So, yeah, how was it received at first when you first started trying to speak up about this when you came back?
People are okay with it. There are all kinds of people. A lot of Indians love me for what I write because I help them understand what is happening around them because they see all those dots and they have those isolated experiences, but they don't really understand why those experiences happen the way they do. So, what I tell them helps them connect the dots and understand what are the underpinning aspects of that culture, which is why India is so chaotic. So a lot of Indians like me, but of course, a lot more Indians don't like me.
Right.
The reason India is such a crazy hellhole is because most people don't want to change. Hardly anyone wants to change. And they want to be comfortable in the status quo. Um, a lot of Westerners don't like me. I was cancelled from a conference in Frankfurt a few years back. I was going there. I had booked my ticket. I had arrived in Frankfurt, and they cancelled my registration because apparently I trigger people. So there are all kinds of people on all sides who like me and don't like me.
Yeah, of course. Well, that makes sense. Frankfurt, of course, isn't that being the Frankfurt Institution, where cultural Marxism started at the same place, I believe.
No, this was actually surprisingly a mining conference. I'm in
Oh,
natural resources, and this
yeah,
was a
yeah,
mining conference. And uh, can, we like to say internally that the most right-wing aspect of the industry is the mining industry.
right.
So if mining has gone woke, you can understand how degraded in many ways Western civilization
Mm.
has become.
Yeah, things like critical race theory and cultural Marxism have definitely ingrained themselves in every single industry. So, but with what you were saying, you were talking about how lots of Indians like you because you sort of explain the experiences that they've gone through. For an Australian or a Westerner who has no idea about your work, could you explain what kind of experiences an Indian is often going to find when living in India?
Well, you have to really visit the country, Lawrence. There's no vocabulary does not help you explain that country. It's a country of non-stop hassles, a non-stop chaos. There's no system in that country, which means that if you think that you would be driving on the left-hand side, when you actually land on the road, you realize that people are driving on the right hand side, they are driving on the sidewalk, they are going over the sidewalk on the other side to drive on that side. And that is pretty much how everything works. There is pretty much no system in anything. You go to a government office, absolutely everyone is interested in doing nothing but asking for bribes. And after taking bribes, they will not do the job either. You give money to a friend or family, your money will never return back. No one can be trusted. Contracts will be broken the moment contracts go in your favor. You realize that the society has no concept of values, uh, has no moral fabric, and then you start talking with people, you start reasoning with people, and you realize that it's a completely irrational society. They go about, you can actually do a very good study on logical fallacies by arguing with Indians, because they go into whataboutery, they do all kinds of fallacies, and actually they can probably write a perfect book on logical fallacies by having an argument with Indians.
Yeah, no, I have argued with plenty of Indians when I first started. So I started getting involved with like anti-immigration rhetoric maybe a year and a half ago. Just when I sort of started realizing what was really going on, and when I realized how many Indians were coming over, I tried to analyze it and sort of dissect it online publicly. And the amount of Indians in my comment sections just going off their head, just abuse, just all these sorts of things. I was amazed. I was so shocked. I was like, I'm just trying to understand your culture, but they get so angry at you for doing so. So,
Yes, and yeah, and also because they don't want to change,
hmm,
so they are not interested in truth. And Lawrence, I have said this many times before, and I'll say this again. When I arrived in the United Kingdom, it took me about a year to start realizing that people there were speaking the truth for the sake of speaking the truth. It took me a real long time to understand that truth should be spoken for the sake of truth.
hmm,
And Unfortunately, that's not the culture I grew up in, despite the fact that I think my dad was the most honest Indian I have ever met. He was financially very, very honest. but lying is a part of the society, and he lied profusely as well.
Mm.
But at least in financial terms, he was an extraordinarily honest person, which was by itself a huge step forward for where Indian culture is.
Yeah, right. Yeah, and of course, Western liberals have this blank slate idea that values are just intrinsically a part of human beings without any sort of influence or inspiration, which is just complete nonsense. So,
Yeah, that is not only nonsense, Lawrence. My guess is that if you want to create a set of social values and a culture of reason, you probably need 4 to 5 millennia.
mm,
So anyone who thinks that you can change a society in a few generations is misguided. He does not really understand how cultures work. And when I'm saying 5 millennia, it also means that I'm assuming that the hardware changes as well,
mm,
because the hardware might not change. And that is a big problem here.
yeah, I think I understand. Yeah, well, yeah, most people don't understand that obviously politics is downstream from culture, and then culture is downstream from religion. And I know you had that conversation with Dr. E. Michael Jones, who I'm a massive fan of, and he talks about like how basically, well, you guys were discussing the idea that India is like a pre-rational civilization in a sense that they don't understand really the concept of logos, which is a very Western idea, like a Greek philosophy idea. And because there are just so many gods, they're just in turmoil all the time. And I believe you used the term that I thought was really interesting in regards to this called emotional constipation because of all the superstitions they have to deal with. That overrides their ability to try and find logic and reason in their communities.
Yeah, and emotional constipation happens with people who probably want to come out of their problems, who probably want to create a value structure.
Mm,
These are the people who are emotionally constipated because a part of their mind is asserting itself. The truth, the mind that caters to truthfulness is probably trying to assert itself. The reality is that most people will not have cognitive dissonance because they are so irrational they can believe in two different things at the same time. And in fact, if you argue with Indians, you realize that they are contradicting themselves in the same sentence, which is absolutely crazy. But they don't realize that they are contradicting themselves
mm,
because they don't have cognitive dissonance. They are not seeking the truth. What they are trying to do is to win an argument. And that is all that matters. And they think that reason is not the way to win an argument. Values is not a framework through which you win an argument. You win an argument by being loud and being violent. And in verbal terms, it might be that they give you rape threats, or they might say crazy things about you which they know nothing about.
mm. Yeah, because I think back on the liberals as well, I think there's this idea that because the internet has been globalized and technology has been globalized, that somehow all the ideas of the past thousands of years have just been downloaded into everyone's mind, and it's just complete nonsense. Another thing I did want to ask you about, so in regards to all the gods, as like a boy growing up in India, how do you even navigate that that realm of spirituality? Like, do you just grow up in a suburb in India and there's like one god that you sort of get immersed in, or do you, as you grow up, are introduced to more gods, or is there any rhyme or reason to it all?
There's no realm of spirituality in that country. Spirituality is a foreign word
Mm,
which has been applied to India without understanding that there is no spirituality in that country. Um, what you do, these are pagan religions, and pagans, and if you look at Abrahamic religions, they are monotheistic for a reason. They one The mortal sin is idolatry and believing in more than one god.
mm,
And they recognize that there was something seriously wrong in believing in more than one god. They recognize that there was something seriously wrong with idolatry. Now, here is the problem. Indians don't go to worship at a temple for spiritual purposes. I have never, Lawrence, witnessed an Indian going to a temple for a spiritual purpose. What an Indian does is to slip in a piece, some money at the counter of the temple, hoping that that bribe would help them get some material resources from the god. So he's not there for spiritual purposes. He's not there for peace. He's not there to create a community. He's there to personally get resources. Resources could be that he might want a better afterlife, or he might want to get admission into something, or he might want to ask for a visa for America. There are temples in in India which are solely dedicated to getting visas for America. So you go and bribe the god to get visas to the US. So this is so if you think that this is a spiritual realm, this is not a spiritual realm. This is materialistic realm, and really there's no spirituality. In fact, if you give Indians a space of peace, if you give them a peaceful environment, they don't like it because they get existential crisis. They have to create noise and chaos around them to avoid that existential crisis.
Yeah, I think that definitely ties into the trend of Westerners just noticing Indians on their phone all the time, just yelling in Hindi, talking to their families all the time, no matter where they are, with no kind of respect for their surroundings. Which to a Westerner is just like, we just see it as complete rudeness. We're like, it's it's insane. So like,
Yeah, and I might add, Lawrence, that I have been to close to 100 countries, and I'm traveling all the time. I'm currently traveling as well,
so excuse me.
and I tell you, Lawrence, that what I see in India is pretty much the same in sub-Saharan Africa and a lot of Latin America. So this is a third world issue, and the and it is very important to understand that this is not just about India. This is a third world issue, and the reason I'm saying that is because what happens to the Western mind, which does not really understand it, that it vacillates between Muslims or Hindus or Africans or Hispanics without really recognizing that the issue is not Hispanic or Muslims or Hindus or Africans. The issue is third world. And the third world countries are third world because they are fundamentally irrational and amoral. And I
Yeah.
use the word amoral, not immoral, for a reason.
Yeah, no, I totally understand what you mean. Yeah, because like for example, in Islam, they can't question the Quran. Like all knowledge comes from the Quran, and to question it is haram. So, and in sub-Saharan Africa, it's all about voodoo and that sort of like very primitive spirituality. So, yeah,
Again, spirituality is a wrong word to use about
yeah,
them because they are pagans and they are only for material benefits. They are not there. So sub-Saharan Africans would do all kinds of rituals to get out of disease, or they to get money. They are not there for a spiritual purpose. And here is another issue, Lawrence. The concept of a spirituality does not stick in their minds. You have to have a value system and a moral fabric to start having the concept of a spirituality stick in your mind, which is a greater vision for humanity, greater vision for life, being creative. These are not the things these people have in any way.
yeah, it's just too abstract for their culture.
These are too abstract. Absolutely, that's the right word to say. Yeah.
Yeah, I understand. So yeah, just so as a kid though, so as you were growing up, did you just see people praying to gods for just their own desires, and that was your first introduction to whatever's going on over there? You just like, oh, why is that man praying to, a rat, for example, or whatever it may be?
Yeah, well, that is only one thing, Lawrence. It's a country of non-stop stupidities.
Right.
If you go to India, it is you cannot have a second where you don't see a stupid thing happening around you. It is a country of absolutely non-stop stupidities. And religion is just one part of it. In fact, these are pagan religions which were consolidated into one by the British, because the Western mind wanted to systemize something which was fundamentally unsystemizable.
Yeah. Yeah,
So
definitely.
they gave a structure to something that had no structure.
Yeah.
And so that is where the British made a mistake, because they made it more confusing to understand it, because the fundamental nature of everything Indians do is that there's no structure, there's no system. So the moment you impose system or a structure on what Indians do, you confuse your mind. You preempt the possibility of understanding India. So if you want to understand Indian religion or the caste system, the first thing you should do is to give up this belief that there's a structure behind it. Now, yes, it's not just when I started growing up. Of course, I mean, you go to a temple and half or sometimes 80% or 90% of the time goes away in auctioning who can uh, touch the god, the idol of the god, or who can do a certain ritual, or who can lead a certain ritual. So you offer, so someone will say, I will offer 100 rupees. Another person will say, I will offer 200 rupees. So they keep going up and up. So there is an auction. So temples have been converted into places to auction who can lead the ritual. That is how materialistic the comprehension of religiosity in India is. And that is why I keep saying the word religion and spirituality simply do not apply to that country, because India exists in a different dimension. It's not a spiritual dimension, it's a materialistic dimension.
Yeah, yeah, it's crazy. It's so crazy. And I remember I was listening to some of your podcasts before to try and prepare. I think one of your listeners mentioned that even the word Hindu is Persian. So, or the word.
Yes, I mean, Persians were calling people on the other side of the river Hindu, which is now in Pakistan, as Hindus.
Right.
When I was growing up, Lawrence, if you asked, and we always did, we always asked the person's his religion. That was very customary when I was growing up. The response was never Hindu. The response was always about related with their village or their caste
Yeah.
or subcaste.
Yeah.
The concept of Hinduism has got inculcated in the society in the last few decades. It wasn't there when I was growing up.
Right. Okay. So, for example, like the idea of the caste system, from what I understand, it's all about this idea that you come from a certain part of like the Brahman or the big god, whatever it may be.
Brahmin.
Brahman,
Yeah.
yeah. And then the Brahman are the priest class. They're meant to be the head. Then you got like soldiers, military. They're meant to be the shoulders. You got merchants and artisans who are the stomach. And then you've of course got the laborers who are the legs. And then there's the Dalits or untouchables who aren't even part of it. So is that an accurate way to understand it, or is it far more chaotic?
No, because the moment you give a structure to something that is not structured, you preempt yourself from understanding what is happening there.
Right.
The system is might makes right. That is the system of that country. Um, so it's a very materialistic culture. It's a materialistic social structure, which is that might makes right. Uh, so whosoever has power is the person who thinks he's above other people. If you elevate lower caste people into positions of power, they behave worse than people the so-called higher caste people do. In fact, Lawrence, whenever you read about caste problems in India, always try to see that it's presented in passive tense. And it is presented in passive tense because it's usually not the higher Brahmin brutalizing lower caste people. It
Really?
is usually lower caste people fighting with other lower caste people to prove who is mightier than the other.
Right. Very
Okay.
interesting. Okay.
Now indeed they are Brahmin were the people who were the thinkers, people, so-called thinkers, because thinking is not a part of the social framework of that society. But anyone who could recite some Sanskrit sentences was seen as a Brahmin. Uh, Warriors were the rulers, and businessmen were businessmen. But this is a very crude uh, structuring of the caste system, because the caste system is such that everyone is trying to establish a oppressor versus oppressed relationship. And that is why, Lawrence, when I go to India, I stop smiling, I stop saying thank you and please. Because the moment I am nice to people, I fall into the oppressed category. You have to be the servant class to be nice to people there. So I of course never opened anyone's gate door when I arrived in the UK. It took me several months to realize that people were being nice just for the sake of being nice.
Yeah.
It took me a long time to understand it, but eventually I understood, and some people do understand that. But but in India, it is a sign of weakness to be nice to other people. So you have to be very careful when you try to be nice to people. And that's, again, it comes from this might makes right. You
Yeah.
always have to be seen as powerful. Now, the way I find a balance, Lawrence, in India is by being condescending, which means that I'm sort of half nice and half powerful.
Yeah.
If I don't, if I don't signal that I'm powerful, they would crush me right away.
No, I totally understand. One of my best mates is South African, and he moved to Australia, and he's just like still getting used to Australian sort of like laid back culture. And he's like, in Africa, you got to be like, dead eyeing them, staring them down, like just make sure you're, authoritative.
Yeah.
Otherwise, yeah, the same thing happens. That you just get, the lowest rung. Like there is no sense that values put you in a hierarchy at all. Which the real tragedy is that Westerners take it for granted, in my opinion. That Westerners.
Well, Lawrence, they did not always take it for granted. When I was studying in the UK, there was no term called political correctness, and I was studying in the UK more than 3 decades back. That those days, people still had retained some wisdom they had gained from colonial rule. But then political correctness started coming in. Leftist people, the so-called woke people,
Yeah.
started asserting themselves in politics. And now we really have morally crippled people running our countries in the Western society. I mean, look at your Prime Minister Albanese. He was in a mosque a few days back and he was thrown out. How dare anyone people who are recent immigrants throw the Prime Minister of a country out? And what makes him think that he should go to a place, or what makes him think that he should invite more of those people to your country? These are morally crippled people. I mean, and not just saying about your prime minister, I'm saying that about my prime minister, Canadian Prime Minister Carney, and I'm talking about the European leaders as well. Across the board, they are morally crippled today.
Yeah, it's tragic. Yeah, well, it's the Labor government, even the Liberal government, are just completely addicted to this multicultural narrative, because in Australia, all the money in Australia is left in property, so you need more people to keep coming in to keep pumping property up and keep the property prices high enough. And then you've got the international student complex, which is just milking students, putting them into subdivided rental houses, keeping the properties high, and they just don't give a shit about anything else. And it is my opinion that they're trying to undermine the Anglo heritage of our country, so that it becomes basically like a third world smart city.
Yeah, my guess is, Lawrence, that they don't want to undermine the Anglo culture of Australia or other Western countries. I think they just simply don't understand it. They are too naive and they are too morally crippled to understand it. It's the same, because I can see third world people behind those eyes. They are they are people who don't have a value system. They don't understand reason. And just because they are leaders, what they are doing is virtue signaling. And virtue signaling comes very easy to people who don't have ideas of their own, because it's easy to go through the society with virtue signaling.
Yeah.
And that's what, let's say, when you listen to people like Ursula of European Union or Kaya Kalas of European Union, when I close my eyes, I think I'm as if I'm listening to a middle class student, because they are just virtue signaling, placating people. They have no concept of real life. And I think this is what these people are. And they are morally crippled as well, a lot
Yeah.
of these people.
And it is very interesting how similar, like, cult, like, obviously it's all, my opinion, it's Marxism that is the root of this, right? Whether it be like brainwashing and that kind of stuff. But it is interesting. Sorry.
I might actually go a step further, because if they were Marxist, they would still do all right.
Right.
At least Marxists believe in ideas.
Yeah.
These people don't have any ideas. They have this is what I tell people, that in Western society, I'm a capitalist, Lawrence, and Western people always have this discussion about whether socialism is better or capitalism is better. And I tell them that, hey, the spectrum is much longer than what you think. While capitalism and socialism might be here, there are people on the other side who are woke, who have no concept of ideas, who are purely materialistic, and who are manipulating you
Yeah.
in ways to get maximum advantage in terms of power and resources. But they have no ideas at all. In fact, Lawrence, virtually everyone I like in India is a socialist. And I
Yeah.
have no problems with that, because for me, they are good enough for India. India would be a much better country if it became a socialist country.
Yeah.
Because what India is today is a chaos. It follows what I call chaosism. There's no socialism. Socialism is a structure. Indians don't have a structure.
Very true, very true. I think what I was trying to get at was the idea that Marxism always paints everything as the oppressor versus the oppressed. And then obviously got third worldism, which, despite it not having any idea of Marxist ideology, it just resorts to the exact same thing. So it's very interesting from my perspective to see liberals in Australia, for example, almost embrace a third world attitude via Marxist indoctrination of, like, okay, we're going to be rude now. We're not going to be polite because this is all, we're trying to rebel against the patriarchy or all these systems that may be. And via doing that, they're almost embracing this third world mindset, which is just...
Although I have to say that is still a perception of the third world mindset.
Right.
Okay, what happens in the third world is that the oppressor and the oppressed does not feel that way, which means that the person who is being oppressed in India, who is getting raped in India, does not understand that he's getting raped. He's only thinking that when he gets into the position of power, he will have the privilege to rape other people.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. So you have to understand that the moment you create the oppressor and oppressed framework, that comes from a framework, whereas these people have no framework. You can take their money away. So Lawrence, let me give you a very simple example. People I have known very closely, when they get cheated, they don't want to fight back against people who cheated them. Almost never. They want to find someone else vulnerable that they could cheat. And and I went to Lawrence, one of the top engineering colleges in India, and I'm telling you, the scene there, invariably, if someone got beaten up, he would not go and beat up the person who beat him up. He would look for someone weaker to take his anger out. And I would get so frustrated. I would tell them, this makes no sense.
Yeah, bizarre.
Go either forgive, which you shouldn't. That's I'm not a Christian, and I still don't understand the concept of forgiveness.
Yeah.
But I shouldn't. But I should fight back. But I should fight back. I should fight with people who victimized me, not not other weak people.
Yeah, that is bizarre. Yeah, it's bizarre. I don't know if I'll...
It's bizarre, but you have to understand this whole plethora of their mind before you understand that this is not a Marxist approach either. They don't really have the concept of oppressor oppressed in that country.
Yeah, interesting. Interesting. Okay, yeah, so yeah, because yeah, I want to talk a little bit about sort of like the Western perceptions of Indians because obviously it started. Well, obviously we got the Boomers, right? And the Boomers are the most liberal sort of brainwashed generation, in my opinion. And I think they were heavily influenced by the Beatles, obviously going to India and Sergeant Pepper's Lonely Heart Club bands. But it's interesting from a Gen Z perspective because I swear only 10 years ago the only perception I had of Indians was literally the Beatles, maybe Apu from The Simpsons, Rajesh from Big Bang Theory, and then you started having those like Slumdog Billionaire movies come out, and then it was like, oh, this very like Indians are these happy kind of peaceful, loving, like like I said, spiritual, although there is no spirituality, and then in 5-10 years we've just had millions come in and it's just been completely shattered. But the boomers are still holding on to these old Beatles ideas of them in a weird way.
Yes, that is certainly a part of the story, Lawrence, that in the 60s and 70s, hippies had a lot of good time in India
Mm,
using their American dollars, which made their life very easy in that country. They did a lot of drugs, they did a lot of sex. So they thought that their cathartic feeling was a spirituality, and they started to conflate the two things, spirituality with catharsis. Now we can go, Lawrence, to a pub Friday evening, get drunk, and we might have a great time, but that
mm.
is not a spirituality, that is just catharsis. But these people were not prepared to understand that that was uh, that was not a spirituality.
Yeah,
Lawrence, in the initial days, Indians who came to the West were actually the higher quality Indians. So people met Indians who weren't working against the society. For example, Indians who came to the United Kingdom when Uganda and Tanzania threw them out were businessmen. They were hardworking people. They were not necessarily the thinker kind of people, but they were participant in the society, and they were not a liability on the society as such.
mm.
But also, you had good people like Salman Rushdie, for example, who is a writer. Uh, uh, some good Indians came at one point of time because they were going to the West after a lot of hardship.
Yeah,
Getting to the UK or getting to the US was extremely difficult 30 or 40 or 50 years back.
mm.
Now anyone can buy a ticket and arrive in the West,
Definitely.
and that is why you are now getting a worse quality of Indians, Lawrence, but you have yet to meet an average Indian. I tell you, you have no clue what an
Yeah.
average Indian is about.
Well, yeah, and I think it's partly also obviously Westerners are not trying to maintain any sort of social hierarchy anymore or cultural hierarchy. They've just given up for the most part, which is also I think part of why the degradation is happening a lot more than it did back in the 70s or whenever it was. But in regards to this idea of like obviously the Beatles and all those hippie boomers going over, you say there's no spirituality, but what about concepts like Dharma, Karma, or the Kama Sutra, or the Bhagavad Gita? Like these seem to, as a Westerner, as like some sort of organized spirituality. But what's the reality of those concepts?
Um, so this is how I put it, Lawrence.
Mm.
Firstly, India had no history until the time the British arrived. Most people don't get it. They think that they read history of Indians dating 4,000 years back.
Mm.
Indians had no history until the time Europeans started arriving. They started constructing a history of India using archaeological evidence and what they found in the written work of Chinese or Italians or whosoever who came to India in those days. So that's how they reconstructed uh, the history of India.
Mm.
There was virtually nothing written in that country until about 1,000 years. Persians were the first people, from what I understand, who started keeping uh, some financial records or records of some kinds.
Yeah.
So that is the earliest written history we can trace back to. Now, where does the dharma and karma comes from? Lawrence, you can. It's so hard to understand where all those words came from. My guess is that a lot of words were cherry picked by the British to make the local belief system look similar to Christianity.
Right.
Okay, so
Yeah.
now if you have, if I give you, uh, let's say, horrible literature, some really vicious literature, and if I give you 1,000 books, I'm absolutely sure you can cherry pick 1,000 sentences which look good to your eyes.
Mm.
So I think British probably did that either consciously or unconsciously. But if they did consciously, they wanted to elevate these people using their own value system.
Right. Yeah.
But they
Okay.
were complete failure. The missionaries and colonialists
Yeah.
were pretty much a failure, despite that they worked in these countries for maybe 300, 400 years. And missionaries were very hardworking people. They went into remote areas. A lot of them died. They truly wanted to change these people.
Mm.
But then they still failed.
It's just too chaotic. Yeah. And then you had, obviously, like, was the partition of India, which divided India up, and then the British just left. Oh, sorry, no. It was, well, I remember the British left. Actually, what I wanted to get at with this question was, when the British left, obviously you had the Sikhs and the Hindus, I believe the Muslims even fighting. Do you see much of a difference between Sikh Indians or Hindu Indians or Muslim Indians
They're
in
the
their?
same people. They
Yeah,
are Tweedledee versus Tweedledum. They are
yeah,
the same people.
because
They
we
are
have
the
lots
same
of.
people. The only difference is, and I know because I live in Canada. I live I spend a lot of time in Vancouver,
Mm,
south of Surrey, which is the most crime-prone city in Canada, which is which is made up of people from India, from Punjab, where the Sikhs come from,
yeah,
and Brampton, which is near Toronto in Canada, which is also among the most crime-prone places in Canada. Uh, and I might say that uh, that area is relatively more crime prone than the rest of the country.
right.
But I would still say that they are all Indians, Tweedledee
Mm,
versus Tweedledum. India changes all the time.
yeah. Because what you often get is you'll talk to Indians and they're like, no, 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 I'm Sikh, I'm Sikh, it's okay, don't relax.
That's great, and this
Yeah.
is I've heard so many times
Mm,
that, and this is where I think the Sikhs in the Western society have become what I called intellectually inbred.
right.
It, is squeezed. These Sikhs come from an area between Pakistan and India. What is the rest of India?
Yeah.
Now, what makes you think that you think you are, God gave you a special mind in that specific area? No, they are just Indians. Pakistanis are Indians. They
Mm,
behave the same way, except that their predominant religion is Islam, but they behave the same way. But what has happened is that there's a certain kind of intellectual inbreeding has happened among Sikh separatists who live among a very small community, who speak Punjabi with each other, and who regurgitate this separatist ideology within themselves. And as a result, they somehow have come to believe that they are different. But I would say they are not only Indians, they are intellectually inbred Indians.
right. Okay. Yeah, because like I find that Sikhs are particularly politically motivated, like compared to like Hindus almost. Like they, for example, in Australia we had our Anzac Day, and the Sikhs felt it necessary to have a little Sikh parade at the within the march, and they were just going, what? Why would you even want to get involved with that? And I did some research into it, and there's this entire like Sikh like little consulate or whatever it may be organization just trying to promote that in Australia. And I'm like, why are they so, why are they so organized? It's crazy.
Well, in Canada, Lawrence,
Mm,
the government is decided by Indians, the Sikh Indians,
right.
because firstly, all these people, all the third world people, live in their ghettos these days. So they are able to elect their own kind of people for the parliament. And every party, whether it's a right wing party or the left wing party, panders to the Sikh votes because they are those crucial 3 or 4% swing vote in Canada.
Yeah.
Without them, you can't win an election in which uh, the winning party makes only 33% of the total votes. So the swing vote becomes absolutely important. And this is where Albanese was in a mosque, because the swing vote makes all the difference in Australia as well, from what I understand. But
Mm.
certainly in Canada, the Sikhs do decide who becomes the government. And that is why the government of Canada cannot really control the criminality in the Indian areas.
Yeah. Yeah, no, it is very similar to Australia. Like, for example, we just had our election not too long ago, and it was a very interesting thing. We had so many Indians basically say that they're turning against the Liberal Party because the Liberal Party was just going too strong on immigration. So it's like Indians have always traditionally been a bit more conservative than than what Labor voters are, but because of that one issue, they basically became like single issue voters and just switched all to Labor. And there's lots of theories that's why Labor got in again for the second term, is because of all these Indian voters. And then we had Jacinta Price, who's now a backbencher for the Liberal Party. But Jacinta Price is a like an Aboriginal woman who worked in the Northern Territory, and her mum's like full blood Aboriginal. And she came onto the media and basically just said it as it is, saying, look, they're importing Indians, so they're importing voters. And she got almost cancelled just for mentioning that. And it is like it's a total threat to our entire democracy, this issue.
Oh, absolutely. And this is where the swing vote is now enabling more and more immigration of people from the third world, because, and this is where I think moral crippledness of politician comes in, because they want the vote. So they will bring in people who can get them the vote.
Mm.
And also the third world immigrants like bigger governments. They third world people don't believe in self responsibility, so they want a nanny government, they want a bigger government.
Yeah, yeah, because they obviously get lost in bureaucracy and there's more corruption there to benefit from and these sorts of things. Yeah, it's insane, insane. What else do I have here? I did want to oh, that's a good one. I'll ask you about Holy, because we had over the past couple of years Holy becoming a much bigger thing in Australia, and to me it just looks like a sort of cultural dominance display using light pollution. So can you explain your understanding of Holy, what you think?
Yeah, I mean, every Hindu festival was relatively simpler in the past
Mm.
when I was growing up. Now, Hindus, for example, have to do a procession outside a mosque in India and make a huge dance and drama about their ritual,
Mm.
to sort of, again, oppressor oppressed mentality. They want to feel good that they can oppress the minority people. And similarly, the exact opposite happens in Pakistan and Bangladesh. Because Muslims are majority there, they will oppress Hindus and Christians in those countries.
Yeah.
So they are all the same people with the same mentality. That is why I do not bifurcate them into Muslims and Hindus. I just prefer to call them Indians, or better still, third world people, because this is the mental situation across the third world people that I have seen. Now, Holi was supposed to be a simple affair. Men would go out on the street usually and put color on each other. And now it has become a signaling issue, and it has also become a way to sexually molest women at the same time, because now they have started using this as an excuse. And this is happening within India as well, because women are coming out, and men find this as an excuse.
Mm.
Now, as a woman, should I be coming out? I shouldn't be. But again, women are the other side of the same coin, and we can have a separate discussion on that if you want to.
Yeah, sure.
But they are no innocent. They are no innocent. Indian women are no innocent.
Right.
In fact, I don't know about the liberal, leftist, woke aspects of the Australian politics, but usually they are dominated by Indian women. So they are no better.
Yeah.
They are no better.
Yeah.
They are no better, except
Same.
that men use their muscle power, women use their cunning to get into positions of power. Um, but this is all social signaling and a way to they have now sexualized the whole event.
Yeah, yeah. And I don't think I understand how important that is for a Western to hear because, again, you've got all these Facebook mums and Facebook groups like embracing Holi as if there is some cultural depth to it, as if if it's culturing us in some way. And as an Indian, you can just be like,
Yeah,
no,
I mean,
they are, displaying their
yeah,
dominance
I
in your
mean,
country.
yeah, I mean, there is a cultural value to it, which
Mm,
is that this is when the season changes. This is when the summer kicks in,
mm,
and you start celebrate. You sort of play with water because the summer has just kicked in,
right,
and also this is. One of the harvest season as well, so
right,
people
okay.
have money, they are celebrating, but this is now it has become a way to signal to other people and in the Western countries to signal the superiority of the Indian society.
Mm,
And, Australians and Canadians, I'm talking about people of European ethnicity, should be asking this question that if your culture is so superior, why are you here? Why don't you just go back?
yeah.
But they are now trying to prove that their culture is superior. It's a hellhole-ish shithole culture.
Yeah, yeah, totally. And well, it's even worse than that. In Australia, for example, you had an Indian woman politician, funnily enough, talking about how she's like basically an Aboriginal. She's like using some DNA argument to say that, oh, look, Aboriginals and Indians are so related that we're basically Indigenous now. And now you've got Indian groups using the Aboriginal land rights movement to defend them being here, despite the Aboriginals not wanting them here either. And it's just completely absurd.
Yeah, and funnily, we were talking about Sikhs earlier. The Sikhs were among the earliest Indians who arrived in Canada. There were
Right.
probably 1,000 Indian Sikhs in Canada, just about 1,000. But somehow it gives those 2 million Sikhs uh, uh, um, the privilege to claim that they are the original inhabitants of Canada now. So you give them too much leeway and they will take as much as you give them. And again, this happens because they are not they are not centered on fairness and justice.
Mm.
They have no concept of gratitude, and they are trying to get as much resources as they can. They are not impeded by any moral framework. They are amoral people.
Mm. And so, what's your like ought statement for this? Are you on the mass deportations train? Do you think they should just all be sent back? Where do you draw the line of how this is
Well,
reversed or fixed?
ideally, that is the only way to solve the issue. You should, I go to Japan, Korea, and China quite often,
Hmm.
Lawrence, for business. And those countries are 99% or 99.5% made up of natives.
Hmm.
And that keeps them homogeneous, that keeps them very sane and extremely safe, and extraordinarily safe for women. If I were a woman living anywhere in the world, I would want to move to East Asia, irrespective of politics, because I would be so safe in those countries.
Mm.
So yes, absolutely. Ideally, you should never have brought in more than 0.5% of your population as people from the third world, because there are two problems. Firstly, you only want to get the very best, but then there's a problem with getting the very best, because the moment you get the very best, you make those third world societies leaderless. You
Yep.
deplete them of leaders, and they become more fragile because of that emigration. So absolutely, the real solution would be re-emigration, because as it stands today, every single Western country is destined to become ethnic European minority
Yep.
country, ethnically European minority country within 1 or 2 generations, because those under 20 years age are from majority from the third world.
Yep.
Uh, I know 50% of Australians are first or second generation immigrants, for example, and 90% of immigrants these days come from the third world. So you can do very simple math there. I think the only solution would be re-emigration. But the problem is, how do you do re-emigration when in a democratic setup, they have the majority vote? And,
Yep.
uh, more than 50% of women of European ethnicity vote for leftist causes.
Mm-hmm.
It's only male of European ethnicity who have the vote on the on on the towards for the right wing.
Yep.
So unfortunately, how do you get to that? My view is that we are headed for a civil war. There
Yeah.
will be a civil war across the Western world at some point of time. Whether it will happen 5 years from now or 10 years from now, I don't know, but it will happen in my view.
Yeah, there's lots of people, speculating about that. Because, yeah, like you said, what other option is there, really? They are becoming the majority, and you're totally right. Majority of women, of young women, or even women in general in Australia, completely left-wing, completely brainwashed. And not only that, the government is getting more and more extreme with censoring us and with really kind of oppressing us politically. Like, we've got new hate speech laws that have just come in recently, which basically prohibit us even criticizing groups if it makes them feel scared or if it makes them feel uncomfortable. That could be a crime. You can go to jail for a year just for that. So it's getting crazy. But I'm glad to hear you say that you agree that we just gotta send them back, reset a bit
Yeah, but it's
because
not going to be easy, Lawrence, because what is happening in the third world is that the third world across the board is falling apart. Now, I know that's not what the mainstream believes in, because mainstream calls them emerging markets. I call them de-emerging markets. They are receding back to their pre-colonial days. They are going feral right now. So the third world is going so backward that there's no incentive for the third world people to return back to the third world. The third world people are in the West for only one reason, and that is money. They would go back to the third world if they could make the same money in the third world. But unfortunately, the third world is becoming more difficult, not less, as it stands today. So that is why, for me, the equation settles at a civil war, and that might come 5 years from now, 10 years from now, but it will be an ugly war, because the right wing in the West will be again vicious, brutal right wing, and it will not necessarily be a moral, rational right wing. So you are looking forward to a very chaotic future in the Western society.
great, good to hear.
And that is why, Lawrence, I am one of those rare people who love Trump, because Trump has done at least one thing, which is that he has stopped all illegal immigration. There's no illegal person walking into America today. He has put serious restrictions on legal immigration. Now, even if you have H-1B visas, if you
Yeah,
return back
yep.
home, you might have to wait for 2 years before you get an interview with the embassy. So he is doing whatever he can within his capacity, because he has to fight with the Supreme Court, he has to fight with all the woke and leftist people, and he has to fight with companies as well who are there for profit.
Yeah.
And I work for some of those companies, and I understand that they want cheap labor, and they want more and more people as soon as possible. So I think Trump is doing the right thing, but he's the only Western leader who has some spine, despite all his flaws.
No, I totally agree. I'm a massive Trump fan too. I think the only Achilles heel, obviously, being his relationship with Israel and those sorts of things, in my opinion. But yeah, the work he's done, with ICE and just with the Overton window in general, I think he's just completely shattered, the woke narrative to an extent. And I think it's made way for people like Rupert Lowe, for example, who, in my opinion, I'm more of a fan of than Trump at this point, just with his rhetoric. I'm hoping that Rupert Lowe, goes full steam ahead and really takes over. And hopefully that's just the beginning. Hopefully we get more leaders like this with the same kind of backbone and the same edge.
Well, Trump has made free speech more and more mainstream. Nigel Farage has become more mainstream in the United Kingdom, for example. So yes, absolutely. He has brought a cultural change as well in
Mm.
political correctness.
Yeah, it is amazing. So there's like, I do have some hope in that regard. At least, we might have a proper fight in this if it all goes to shit. But yeah, I'm trying to think if there's much. Oh, what time is it? We have been going for an hour. I did want to talk about, that's right, the relationship between Australia and India currently, and what you think about that being in the resource sector. Because we've signed deals like, I'm not sure if you're familiar with the ECTA agreement, which was this crazy deal that Scott Morrison signed with Modi, that basically just permits us sending all of our resources to India without them paying any like tax or anything. So what's your kind of like overarching view of the relationships there in regards to trade and resources?
Well, I'm not aware of this agreement that you just mentioned. I
Mm.
was aware of Adani owning a lot of coal projects in near Keynes,
Yeah,
and I haven't followed them closely, but
yeah, that's right.
you have to be aware that Indian businesses don't think in terms of creating value. Now I understand there's a lot of money mindedness and manipulation in businesses in the Western society anyway, but they are still thinking in terms of creating value for the customer.
Mm.
Indian businesses don't think that way. They think in terms of transferring money from your wallet to their wallets. That's the only thought process. Any value creation is incidental. So they will cheat on everything. They will cheat on the quality of product they create. They will mix coal uh, with rock, normal rock.
Mm.
They will degrade everything to the level that it would be barely acceptable to you.
Yeah,
This is
yeah,
like that Barbie doll thing that they want to increase the size of the boobs and butts to the extent that the parents would accept it, because children want the maximized size of boobs and
yeah.
butts. So the Indian businesses will degrade the quality of product to the level that they would continue to run.
Right.
That's how their mind works.
Yeah.
So they will destroy you completely. Um, I have historically, for the last 3 decades, I have worked for multinational companies who want to invest in third world countries. And I keep telling them that yes, you pay only $2 or $3 in daily wages,
Mm.
but understand that the cost of doing business is so much more that it more than destroys the benefit from cheap wages.
Mm.
And it always takes them a few years to understand it. Uh, and this is exactly what you are going to face. You will start facing, and you already face those. Bridges will start falling apart, planes will start crashing, roads will get wiped away after a single rain.
Mm.
Those things, the problem with Indians is that you will get micro compromises built into everything that you build. And in a complex society, when you have micro compromises, they compound very rapidly and things start falling apart very quickly.
Yeah, very true. Now we're seeing that in our building sector. We've got these building developer companies that just are hiring Indians now, and you got inspectors going around like crazy, just finding all sorts of cracks in the foundations, and or they'll take out the rebar out of the concrete and let it set without any foundational rebar. Just madness.
They will do everything, not anything, but absolutely everything to
Mm.
minimize their cost, do the work in minimal amount of time, and provide you the quality that is barely acceptable. And they might even build up a house without laying proper foundations,
Mm.
because what happens 2 years from now is none of their business.
Mhm. Yeah, exactly. Okay, beautiful. I think I got a couple of questions I can think of. If there's anyone in the chat at the moment, if you have any questions you'd like asked, just comment them quickly before we finish up. So another quick one was, so on top of the ECTA agreement that we signed, we also did a more recent agreement called the Mutual Recognition Agreement, which is just preposterous and insane. It's an agreement that basically acknowledges and values Indian degrees as equal to Australian university degrees. So if an Indian has gone and studied in India as a doctor, their degree is now accepted in Australia as just as equal to our degrees. Can you explain why that is so insane in regards to the
Uh,
Indian education
well,
system?
if you want a medical degree, Lawrence, I might be able to arrange it for you without any problem.
Okay, cool.
Despite the
Feel
fact
comfortable.
that you are not even an Indian citizen or an Indian resident, but it is very easy to buy degrees in that country.
Wow.
When I was about 3 decades back, it was very difficult to buy degrees of engineering or medical, but absolutely everything was easy those days. Now everything has become very easy. You can buy degrees off the shelf, but moreover, you don't even have to buy them necessarily. You can register yourself for a course, and you can get someone else to give examination on your behalf, or you never have to attend a single day at the university, and you would still get your degree because of whatever you do.
Mm.
Let me give you a very simple example. I have a relative who is a professor in the university, and this was an MBA examination paper that he showed me, and those were hilarious. The examination papers.
Mm.
This was English medium college. The one person had written the subject as financial management or something.
Yeah, yeah.
So he could not even spell the subject properly. And then you saw none of those examination papers would have got more than 0% marking in my view, because they wrote something like, what is the importance of financial management? And the answer would be, financial management is very important for companies, therefore financial management is very important for us, therefore financial. So it's just going around in
Yeah,
circles.
yeah.
And I said, what happens? What is the failure rate? And his response was, Jayant, I have to pass certain number of people. So 70
Really?
or 80% of the people have to be passed. That's how the whole thing works.
Or what? He gets shut down. Is that what happens?
He would be fired. He would be
Mm.
fired.
Wow. Insane. Okay, yeah, so you're saying we shouldn't accept Indian doctors who have been certified in India. It's not a great idea.
The elite of India can be very good, but the
Yeah.
problem is that there is so much noise around the good people that you are better off on a adjusted probability basis,
Mm.
not accepting those certificates at all.
Mm. I actually think it would be very funny if I could get an Indian doctor degree. I'll put it on the wall in the back and say, I'm a doctor, what do you mean? Be a good leeway into explaining how shit
Yeah,
everything's
yeah,
going.
yeah.
Yeah, beautiful. I think what else is there? I mean, I would like to hear your thoughts on Indian women actually. Now that you've mentioned it, because it is very easy to see them as victims when you got things like dowry, or you got. I think there is a quite a strong sense in even like aborting females. I've heard like the Indian or Hindus or Indians will abort females very often to try and avoid having that. So can you go into that a bit before we finish?
Yeah, let's get into active voice here. Who are the people? Who are the influencers in the families behind getting a female fetus aborted? Who are the people who ask for maximum dowry? Is it women or is it men?
I'd imagine
You have
men.
to question that thing.
Yeah.
Women have a more than a majority participation in asking for extra dowry, the senior women in the families.
Wow.
So women are no innocent. They are the other side of the same coin. And anyone who thinks, and as a man, it's very easy to be sympathetic towards women,
Mm.
not just because we want to be nice to people who are weak, but also men are sexually charged in a way that they have a positive feeling for women.
Mm.
But women are no better in any way or form compared to men in that country. So yes, dowry happens and crime against women happen, but only based on might makes right basis. When
Mm.
women have positions of power, I tell you, they are more vicious than men are.
I believe you.
I don't. I don't want an Indian woman with a gun facing me if she considers me a criminal. I
Mm.
prefer a man because she would be more likely to shoot at me. So no one should think that somehow these women are innocent.
No, I agree with you. We've got a similar thing, yeah, in Australian government right now. We've got like the most women we've ever seen in our government, and every parliament time is just like a soap opera. It's the worst. They get to the bottom of nothing. There's a few really good ones that are almost doing more than the men, but generally speaking, yeah, it's not ideal. I think yeah, just about done. I do have one abstract question for you now because I don't want to regret not asking it. Um, as you said, there's no order in India. So how does that apply to Indian music or Bollywood in regards to the arts? Because Indian music, had a fairly significant impact. Is that just what Persian music reinterpreted by Indians? Like, are there like dedicated musicians that you've seen in India that do really tap into something kind of virtuous?
Um, so Lawrence, my view is that people who lack civilizational values
Mm,
are better in sexualized music, sexualized drama, and a very palatable food.
mm,
This is my view on the subject because the more a person thinks, the less he wants a spicy food, the less he wants fried food, and the more he likes classical music.
mm,
Bollywood music is heavily sexualized, um, and it is sexualized in the Barbie doll way, which is that they sexualize in a way that it can pass censor control, uh, making it look as if there's nothing sexual about it, but people are there for sexual aspect of the cinema.
mm.
The audience is predominantly interested in violence and sexualized scenes and sexualized music. Now, again, on a Friday evening, I tell you, you will enjoy that music, and
Yeah.
you will enjoy, after a few beers, you will enjoy a few pizzas and fried food.
Mm,
But that does not mean that that music and cinema would calm your mind, would give you any peace, or make you spiritually a better person.
mm.
I actually dislike. I haven't watched an Hindi movie for a very long time because they depress me because I can see what is behind it.
Mm,
Also, in Bollywood movies, there's so much irrational violence. It's even the guy who is supposedly doing the right thing is acting irrationally,
mm,
and that is the way Bollywood works because that caters to the irrational, amoral mind of Indians. Indians want to destroy bad things through bad means,
mm.
and that does not work. When you employ bad means, you will have bad results. As a result, Indian policemen actually kill anyone. There's something called if you go to Wikipedia, you can see something called encounter killings, and Indian police is habitual of killing people they want to get rid of. You
Wow.
can pay in my city, you can pay about $30,000 to kill pretty much an average or a better than average middle class person
Wow.
through the police. So the police will now do clean murders for you if you want that.
Insane. Yeah, well, yeah. In regards to the music thing, yeah. Well, E. Michael Jones has talked about Dionysian music versus Apollonian music. With Dionysian, like the festival
Absolutely.
of
Although,
Dionysus.
although as you recognize, I talked with Dr. Michael Jones once.
Mm.
He is one of those people who still thinks that India can be changed.
Yeah. Yes.
Okay. And
Yeah.
I tell you, Lawrence,
Mm.
I lived in India. I worked all my life. When I was 4 or 5 years old, my dad started getting me to work with him. So I was a child labor in his company.
Mm.
And I worked in India for many years. And I tell you, I left India after returning back from the UK because at one point of time, I recognized that India cannot be changed. In fact, here is the big problem. You will, and you will see within your lifetime and my lifetime, that Christianity will have got destroyed because of third world people.
Mm.
Pagan rituals will start emerging in Christianity eventually, because already the the priesthood, and I don't know the all the
Yeah,
full
yeah, yeah.
how the full system works, is starting getting dominated by third world uh, Christian priests, and they will bring in paganism. So so um, Dr. Michael Jones, in my view, he's a perfectly fine guy, but I think
Mm.
he's wrong in thinking that India can be changed. In fact, the moment you try to change it, you will change yourself.
Mm. Well, yeah, the lowest common denominator. Yeah, it is very interesting. I've debated this with him as well. I'm a massive fan of his work. That is, I hold the same opinion as you. That he just is doesn't want to confront maybe the genetic determinism component of what's going on.
Unless you accept and understand genetic determinism, you are
Mm.
going nowhere, because everything is downstream to that.
Yeah,
And our genes evolved based on where we grew up,
yeah,
where our ancestors grew up. So genetic determinism is the core, but unfortunately we don't want to talk about it.
yeah.
And most good people, even good people, don't want to recognize it. And I think the reason why they don't recognize it, Lawrence, is that good people have a huge handicap. They don't understand the nature of evil,
Mm-hmm.
because they cannot comprehend how evil can be, because they don't have bad thoughts about other people. They don't have ill wishes against people, so they don't understand why anyone would be like that.
Yeah.
But genetic determinism is the core, because high IQ people don't understand what the handicap of low IQ is.
Well, yeah, yeah. Things like high IQ comes with things like empathy and trying to understand different perspectives and trying to think more abstractly. And yeah, it is an ugly reality if it is the reality. If it's the hard set reality, it means that there is just an ingrained hierarchy to nature in the world, which I think which is what the British, especially with them being Protestants, not Catholics, they very much embrace that idea with their anthropology and that. But we just completely abandon those sciences. And I think, yeah, the Catholic lens definitely cucks a bit when it comes to this topic. And I think maybe, oh, sorry, excuse me. Let's wait for the camera to get on. But yeah, like the Camp of the Saints, for example, being the perfect example of a book that tries to portray this problem of Christian empathy, Christian suicidal empathy. So yeah, it's a bit of a conundrum. But yeah, so yeah, you're
Yeah,
pretty.
it is. And that is why I think a lot of people who are enabling immigration might be some of them might be suffering from suicidal empathy.
Mm-hmm.
But once you have faced the reality of what immigration means, because now, Lawrence, you don't have to go to Africa or India to understand Africa or India. You can go to an Indian ghetto in Australia,
Mm-hmm.
or African ghetto, or Sudanese ghetto, or Somalian ghetto in Australia, to understand what those countries are. So this is no longer about suicidal empathy, because they are morally crippled. They either understand, or they refuse to understand when evidence is right in front of them.
Yeah, totally. And it's one of those things I always think to myself, it can take a lifetime to try and dissect a person's mind and try and change them into something that's better and, a first world kind of person. You
my
have a
my
billion
my guess
people.
is my guess is 5 millennia at best, provided changes start happening from bottom up,
Yeah.
rather than top down. But how do you start a bottom up process?
Yeah, exactly.
Lawrence, I have never been able to. Uh, uh, the reason I worked in New Delhi for 10 years, and uh, I helped a lot of people get a lot of things done. No one ever had any gratitude. I
Mm.
never managed to make a person think beyond money and resources. He would backstab me the moment he no longer needed me. That
Mm.
is how the culture works. How do I sit down with you and make you think about an interest in truth? He would laugh at me, because
Mm.
he would say, Jayant, you are not practical enough. You are too you are too honest and too truthful. So the problem is that you have to stop a bottom up process. But then how do you start a bottom up process?
Mm.
And my view is, Lawrence, that in certain third world societies, Christian missionaries started taking babies away from their parents in the hope that they could start a bottom up process. That's my guess. I don't know for sure.
Mm.
But even then, they failed because there's something called, as you rightly said, genetic determinism.
Yeah, unfortunately.
So, again, 5 millennia is the minimum time required to bring a change. And
Mm.
that would be only if luck works in your favor.
Yeah, I definitely, yeah, I agree. Um, okay, I think the final question that's on the tip of my tongue, I am curious to ask you about. Then we maybe have some final comments and pack it up, if that works for you. Because we're going for an hour and
Yeah,
a half.
absolutely.
Beautiful, yeah. So, last question is, I'm curious about your experience in India with if you were around at that time, if that is, with the introduction of like the cell phones, and what your opinion is on the impact of pornography in India and that being sort of introduced.
So there was a lot of talk about how information technology was going to change the world.
Mm.
2, 3 decades back, people were thinking, and I was thinking the same thing, that information technology would connect all of us together, and not just products would start flowing in from the West, but enlightenment would rapidly flow into the
Yeah.
third world countries, and these people would become rapidly enlightened. Uh, but what you experienced was the exact opposite. Because what you did not understand, and what I did not understand at that time, was that you have to make a person's psyche moral and rational before you uh, give him prosperity, education, and information.
Mm-hmm.
Because otherwise, the underpinning amorality and irrationality and materialism will use technology to maximize acquisition of resources. And that is what has happened.
Mm.
Indians did not use the most data in the world today, from what I understand, but to what output? They use it for pornography or to exchange WhatsApp superstitions. And I'm sure you're not a part of an Indian group, but they exchange crazy amount of conspiracies and pornographies
Mm.
and hatred for minorities openly.
Mm.
And none of those things are going to benefit Indians. Again, the conventional wisdom is that prosperity and education improves minds of people. I think it has a perverse effect because the underpinning immorality and irrationality is still there. And in fact, you disincentivize people to become rational and moral
Mm.
if they have too much money and education. My grandmom should get a Nobel Prize. She passed away many decades back, but she should have got a Nobel Prize for telling me that there are some people who are best off left at the edge of starvation. And I tell you, I have experienced this again and again. Those
Mm.
people who have to worry about food for this evening stay focused and they stay out of trouble.
Mm.
They create more trouble once they have more access to food. And in a way, I think a lot of problems in the Middle East started erupting once they started having access to money and food.
Mm.
They had free time to create trouble.
Yeah, no, I just totally
And now
understand.
Indians are doing the same thing.
Yeah, very interesting. So you just reminded me. I just put a thought into my head. Yeah, I was thinking of. It's very similar to almost, in my opinion, what I understand of the myth, like the Prometheus myth of like giving fire to like just the primitives and they're going crazy with it. Sorry, what was on the tip of my tongue? I was thinking about Indians. It had something. Sorry, forgive me. I'm drawing a blank on this one now. No, it's not coming to me. Sorry, I lost my train of thought. Well, I guess yeah, we could pack it. Oh, I did want to ask two things actually. Yeah, you had this story about your father just quickly, but to finish it off, maybe that's a good anecdote for people to understand. Your father apparently owned a home. Is this right? And then someone hired guards to just walk into his home and just protest and stay there, and then he couldn't do anything about it.
Well, so my dad was an extremely politically influential person in the
Mm,
central part of India at one point of time. Uh, he used to wine and dine with the chief ministers and the top ministers at one point of time.
right.
Now he had been retired for 3 decades. So a family member who is a doctor, and doctors are probably, and this connects with what you were asking earlier. The medical profession is probably even more corrupt than bureaucracy in India. They exchange commissions. They do all kind of favors to each other. You murder someone, I'll give you a death certificate with heart attack on it or whatever.
Wow.
So a relative uh, uh, put armed guards in my dad's house. And I have videos of my dad making those statements. Um, Armed guards in my dad's house by bribing the top police officers, all the way to the very top and the chief minister as well. And and then in India, if you give about 300 Australian dollars to the police, they will file police complaints and do investigation as well for that money. So my
Insane.
dad had to basically, this went on for about 6 months. They wanted to stop me from coming to India by filing those police cases, uh, and 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 the police thought that Canadian government would, because in India, if you have a police case against you, you cannot get a passport anymore. They didn't know that Canadian government does not do those things.
Mm,
In fact, I had so whenever I go to India, I involve Canadian High Commission about my trip, because I know there are some people who don't like me. Uh, so Canadian High Commission gave them a call, but so they stopped me getting, let's say, murdered by the police to get those people acquire my house. Um,
wow.
uh, Eventually, my dad had to sell his house to uh, another mafia to get out of that trouble, and he then went to live with one my elder sister,
Wow.
who was my elder sister has been great. She looked after him until his last date. He passed away last month, actually,
Oh, wow. I'm sorry
at
to
the age
hear.
of 91.
Rest in
Yeah,
peace.
but the guy was great. My elder sister looked after him. But this goes on. This is the way the country works.
Mm.
It's all about bribes and corruption.
Yeah, wow. So on that note, you did just jog my memory completely. Just like one last, I swear it's the last. Nepotism, Indian nepotism, because in I believe it's Canada, you've got like Tim Hortons, where like the Indians have completely taken over. In America, I believe it's the Patels taking over motels, and in Australia, we're seeing here Indians taking over all of our servo stations, our petrol stations. And can you explain how that's not an accident? That is like an intentional part of Indian culture when it comes to foreigners.
That's not nepotism. That's not nepotism,
Right.
Lawrence. So this is your perception of the Indian culture, which is you are filtering what you are watching using your Western eyes.
Mm,
There's no nepotism in that country. No Indians like any other Indian. They hate each other. They are forever at war with each other. So if you go to Tim Hortons, you will watch these Indians backstabbing each other.
wow.
The only reason they hire Indians is because they know how to exploit Indians better than they know how to exploit other people. And they know that it's almost impossible to exploit people of European ethnicity.
Right.
So
Interesting.
it is not nepotism. It's all about convenience in exploiting other people. And also, if you want to gang up against someone, then an amoral, irrational mind is easier to bring you with you to gang up against other people.
Yeah. Yeah.
Because, if I want to, you know, rapes in the Western society happen on an individual basis. They are usually no, or at least ethnic Europeans don't gang rape women,
Mm,
because it's very hard for an ethnic European to communicate with other ethnic European men.
mm-hmm,
Let's gang up to rape a woman.
mm-hmm.
But with an amoral, in an amoral society, you can gang up against other people because morality has no impeding force in that such a society.
Yeah, interesting. Okay, that's very insightful. All right, thank you so much. I think that was great. We might have some final comments. I'll shut down the stream. We can say goodbye to each other personally. So, Jayant, you can be found at you do a show. Is it weekly, or I'm not sure when it always comes, but the
Oh,
Jayant.
this is just a fun thing, informal thing I do,
Right.
mostly for Indians.
Oh,
I do a
excuse me.
weekly call during India morning time on Space,
Yep.
X Space, for about an hour.
Yep.
This is what I do. But what I do mostly is a lot of writing work. I'm working on a book on Third World,
Right.
and I do a lot of talks on geopolitics on other platforms.
Yeah, beautiful. Okay, so you're Jayant Bhandari at X. You have the Jayant Bhandari Show, and then you also organize a annual conference, isn't it? It's morality and economics or something similar.
Yeah, it's a seminar called Capitalism and Morality,
Right.
and this term comes from my getting influenced by Ayn Rand at one point of time.
Right.
I'm still a fan of her. I think she understood the viciousness of backward cultures better than any Western philosopher ever understood, because she grew up in a vicious society.
Right.
So this comes from her, and I do it every year in Vancouver, downtown Vancouver, Canada. And I do it to remind people that Western culture, Western philosophy is what separated us from animal kingdom. So in hope that people can protect it somehow, but I
Right.
see it getting washed away with time.
What would you say the best Iran book is to read? Atlas Shrugged, or
Well, I read them at different times, and I read virtually probably all her books and probably most of her articles. The Fountainhead was great for me. The Virtue of Selfishness, I think I have read it 2 or 3 times, and I
right?
think it made a huge impact on me. Also, remembering that she uses the word selfishness differently than what it actually probably means in the native English speaker's mind. So
Interesting.
she just means not to compromise yourself for other people. That's all she means. She is not talking about being self-centered.
Very interesting. Okay, yeah. Well, thank you so much for your time. We'll pack up the show. It's been great, very insightful. Answered all my questions, so I very much appreciate that. Yeah, this has been Jayant Bhandari. Thanks for joining me at Hear What's News. Hope you enjoyed. See you next time. I'll shut it down now.